Hello and welcome to another episode of our ongoing series on amplifying growth, achieving impact for businesses. I'm Pallavi from People Matters. In our consistent efforts to unlock critical insights on talent transformation, upskilling workforce, and business growth in the new age economy, we at People Matters initiated an exclusive dialogue series with industry leaders in partnership with upGrad for Business. Through these meaningful conversations, we've tried to dive deeper into three major aspects: role transformation, reducing skills obsolescence, and driving employee engagement, which are pivotal for businesses to thrive in a dynamic work environment. The learnings from these exciting conversations will be captured into an ebook titled How Do We Empower Organizations to Thrive in the New Age Economy, which will help businesses lead in the future of work. Today's session will focus on reducing skill obsolescence. How can HR leaders help companies bridge the talent gap by building soft skills critical for organizational growth? Are there any ways to measure the effectiveness? What are some of the areas that talent leaders need to look at immediately to keep pace with an evolving skill demand? What should be the approach in the current environment, and much more. To discuss all this and more, I am happy to invite Anuradha Mishra, Senior Vice President, Talent Learning and Inclusion Leader, Marsh McLennan, and Minaxi, Indra, President, upGrad for Business. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Pallavi.
So
Thank
let
you.
me introduce my viewers to both my panelists. Anuradha heads the Talent, Learning and Inclusion for Marsh McLennan's Global In-House Center, which includes Mercer and Marsh McLennan Global Services, formerly JLT India. She's an ideator and a change initiator. Working with millennials, she believes in adapting systems and creating opportunities by thinking differently. Meenakshi has 2 decades of business growth experience across companies like IBM, Cisco, SAP, LinkedIn, Uber, and now upGrad. She's a purpose-driven leader, passionate about people's transformation. She leads the upGrad for Business and upGrad Work Better teams, focusing on bringing outcomes-driven learning programs for her customers. And on that note, let me start off with Anuradha first. As we dive into this timely discussion on reducing skills obsolescence, one of the very important facets that I would like to highlight here in this conversation is the urgency for soft skills. So, according to you, what would be the role of soft skills in building a competitive edge for businesses, especially if you look at the past year and move into an uncertain future?
Sure. Pallavi, when we talk of obsolescence, it is important that we understand what this word really means, right? It's really about the gap that a person has in terms of what the role demands. Now, what has happened in the last 2 years is that organizations have, some have grown and some have shrunk, of course. And with shrinking organizations, the roles have changed. For growing organizations as well, roles have rapidly changed. And in these rapid role changes, what has happened is that a lot of people have been asked to take up roles which they've not really prepared for ever. And they just take up these roles and they're supposed to then go and deliver on these roles. Now, skill obsolescence will happen when your current skills are not matching your future skills or the future requirements of the role. Now, what happens as a result is that there are people who are there on the roles, but with time, they're not good enough to, cater to that role as well, right? So that's in a very layman term, that is what skill obsolescence is, and the role of L&D, I feel, is any learning and leadership organization is when we're looking at skill obsolescence, how do we reduce this, right? Whether it is physical skill obsolescence, which would be cognitive skills and abilities are deteriorating for colleagues, or if it is an economic skill obsolescence, which is when skills which were previously utilized in the job are no longer being utilized, or organization forgetting is also another way of skills becoming obsolete. And then there is this perspectivistic obsolescence, which is outdated views and beliefs of the work environment. In all these areas, I think the role of learning team is to really bring back the focus on skills. In terms of behavioral learning, I think going back to when I started off saying that new roles have come up in a rapidly changing environment. In behavioral skills, a lot of people have now taken up managerial positions, not being ready for a managerial position, not realizing what it requires to be a manager. All of us have been individual contributors. We've been great individual contributors. And during the pandemic, we've not had the opportunity to upgrade ourselves rapidly. And because of this absence of upgradation, what has happened is a lot of people have taken up managerial roles or have taken up roles which require very deep behavioral knowledge. And without that knowledge, we've really promoted people for failure rather than promoting them for success. I think the role of learning really comes in here, where we're preparing people for success. We're preparing them to become, to not only get content on behavior, but to get the experience on behavior, to bridge that gap of content, skill, and the experience so that you can take that experience and apply back.
Great thoughts there. I mean, actually, any recent observations that you've had, anything that you would like to share here?
Sure, Pallavi. And first of all, thank you for this time. And Anuradha, pleasure meeting with you over this panel. I thought what Anuradha said is very powerful, really setting people up for success. And whether you're looking at content, whether you're looking at skilling and training as a way of that. Pallavi, I would just maybe very briefly allude to in a corporate setting is not just about what you know, but also about how we communicate, how we build camaraderie, how do we influence, build alignments which eventually lead for successful outcomes. In fact, one of the studies by Harvard University mentioned that companies get 256% return on investment when behavioral or soft skills trainings are done impactfully. And now, what that really means is the converse should also be true that if we don't have very intentional, mindful behavioral training for our workforce, it might have a detrimental impact to our business as well. So, my pointer here would be to develop ongoing job related programs focusing on collaboration and effective communication. I think it aligns well with what Anuradha spoke as well, to really build soft skills for companies as a way for employee engagement, retention, and overall growth for the companies or the businesses that we are here.
Surely. In fact, Anuradha, we want to know from you at Marsh McLennan, when initiating the interpersonal skills program in partnership with upGrad Work Better, what were the biggest factors, driving force, and what was the desired outcome of launching this program?
So let me just get back a little bit on the history. So since 2019, before 2019 rather, we used to have these very strong programs running in the organization where we would bring in transitioning managers or people who had just joined the organization and they were really transitioning into a corporate world. We were bringing them together for these conversations to say, you've come into a corporate organization. Now, how do you build your networks? Do you become resourceful in an organization? Similarly, if you're transitioning roles, you would have conversations around saying that how do you build strong teams? How do you become a role model as a people manager? During the pandemic, while these programs were going on, what we also realized is that people did not have the luxury of having conversations with each other to learn from each other as peers, right? And also the fact that there was very little time available on Zoom meetings of 40 minutes and 30 minutes where you had to manage to bring in a lot of perspectives, whether it was your everyday work, whether it was your numbers, and then you also had to do these very motivational conversations. What happened as a result is we started seeing that while the engagement scores were very high for the organization, the real engagement in the organization, which was more of heart to heart engagement, that kind of kept coming down. The empathetic conversations became fewer because you were always running for numbers and you were always running for productivity. And that's when we thought that interpersonal effectiveness is an important piece of organizations' learning and an organization's culture. MMC as an organization is known to be an organization of people. It's known to have a very open culture. It's known to be very people centric. And in such a culture, if you see that the culture is not being, it's not thriving, you're not seeing people recognizing that culture, it becomes a matter of concern. And that's where we brought in interpersonal relationships as a very important part of our learning process. And the idea was, how do you bring back those emotions to the organization of being empathetic, of caring for each other, for being there for each other. I think the focus that we brought back to this conversation has really led us to see how early attrition is going down in the organization over the past 6 odd months, or more than that. The early attrition has gone down. The scores on wellness and how leaders and managers are leading on wellness has gone up because the empathetic conversations have gone up. The idea that every person is bringing in their best to the organization, and inclusion and belonging has become extremely important, belonging being the key word here. So all of that has kind of helped us improve the environment here.
Sure. In fact, in many ways, Meenakshi, it seems like a different approach, unique approach when it comes to, your partnership with Marsh McLennan. So we want to understand from you, how did you align with, Marsh McLennan's unique vision, and most importantly, how did you assess the impact and ensure that, the learner transfer is done, with perfection?
So, while Anuradha spoke about the vision of the organization, through our conversations with her and our team, we also realized that the teams at MMC also strive to protect and promote possibility, helping their clients dream bigger, reach further, and the plan for the opportunities ahead. And
Yeah.
for us, that was very exciting to be a partner in that journey or that vision, if I could. These play a crucial role when it comes to providing a better future for all, and the interpersonal skills really are at the core of it all. Um, so when it all started, the Marsh McLennan team had a very specific ask for us, and that was to develop workshops that focused on communicating effectively and not aggressively, how to use time to maximize outcomes, how to say no in a humble but assertive manner. And that really speaks about the ethos or the culture that an organizations have. After multiple conversations with the MMC team, we understood that all of these needs stemmed from, of course, interpersonal skills, but also we had to keep in mind, how do we measure success out of it? And that's really something that we kept at the foundation of building the different plans and the iterations that we had around it. So while this was one, the other thing that we also wanted to focus on was the productivity gains out of it. And what we also hear is that through the course of the program and post the workshop as well, the MMC team themselves identified that their weekly meetings, how they're conducting it, how they're channelizing themselves, how they are reviewing and reporting numbers improved, and in turn that helped the employee productivity and the business positively. And that for us was a very interesting symbiosis that we got through this engagement. Last but not the least, through our upgrad work better partnership, we also brought in elements of group coaching as an elevator post the workshop. And it's a huge testament to the culture that MMC team had, wherein the strengths and weaknesses of the participants were discussed and a group development plan was chalked out. This garnered employee advocacy, and the entire program, if I'm not mistaken, got a resounding 4.75 feedback. That in itself, to me, is a great testament to one, the vision, second, the planning, and third, the execution.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with what Meenakshi is saying. And Pallavi, just to add to what Meenakshi said when she said possibilities, possibility is the purpose for Marsh McLennan. We believe that the purpose is that we want to make those moments that matter to others, be present in the moments that matter to everyone, and being present in the moments that matter to our colleague is most important, right? And that kind of was a message that we had given to our grads, saying that we want to be present and we want to make those moments really matter for everyone. They need to be memorable, which means that everybody needs to understand what it means, not only from a business number perspective, but also from a little more than business numbers. How do you use yourself as a leader to bring out that, discretionary feeling in every individual to say that I want to give a little more to this organization than what I have really signed up for.
Well, it's wonderful knowing the entire journey. It'll be, great if you can share some key takeaways that you had from this partnership. And when it comes to the impact, if you want to highlight some numbers, to understand how it impacted the learners and the organization overall, and rather.
Mhm. few of my takeaways has been that, and that's kind of very basic to learning, and something that each of us as learning leaders should always keep in mind is to take a very learner centric approach. So when we were working with upGrad, one of our requirements of upGrad was give the learners examples and give them experiences which are centered to their lives. We would not want very generic case studies to be discussed. We would not want very generic situations to be discussed. I want that situation nuanced to what we experience in MMC. And that kind of worked for these conversations that we were having to say that, what is your pain point? And let's make you the center of everything and then find solutions around that. So that's been one of the biggest, and I think that's the impact that people had after coming out of a session. They would come back and say that we had a great conversation with the coach or the facilitator that we had for learning. Yeah. I think the second thing that we learned is give employees permission to learn, right? During the pandemic, most of the times, and pandemic was also a time for us when we were trying to bring in a lot of self-learning tools, Degree and other portals where people could learn by themselves. While you give them a very in uh, in your time, in your place kind of learning, uh, with a very stretched BAU kind of a situation, employees will come back asking, so where is the time? Where is the permission? How do I find time in all that I'm doing to learn as well? And this was one way of saying that this is for you. We're giving you a lot of time to learn. So let's come together and let's learn. So that permission for learning is extremely important, I think. Um, Another thing that we kind of explored along with Work Better was how do you provide blended learning, which is very impactful. It does not only depend on self learning, it does not only depend on one media of learning, but it's blended enough to say that anybody who's coming for learning and whatever be your preferred way of learning, you're getting everything in a package. So whether it is through conversation, some people learn through content, some people learn through experiences, some people would learn some other way, right? And we wanted to give everything to everyone, saying that whatever be the media you learn, but you take away that learning back. It shouldn't be just content which you cannot go and apply. It shouldn't be just experience that you come here, have fun, and then go back and say I had a great time. So it has to be all of it together, but the intent being that there needs to be transfer of learning, meaning it needs to be applicable and applied on the ground. And that I think we did really well with these trainings.
Those were some interesting insights. In fact, Meenakshi, talking about soft skill training being one of the important drivers of a resilient workforce, if you could share how can learning leaders and businesses design more impactful soft skill centric L&D programs? I mean, your thoughts on that.
Interesting question, Pallavi, and that's a whole day of conversation, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. So, in our experience, we've seen that when we align learning to business outcomes, that's where we see magic happen. And keeping that in mind, we believe in wholesome talent development, and we've broken that down into three parts, which is the skill set, the tool set, and the mindset. So, mindset is usually the appetite to react, adjust, and action the change that we want to be. Tool set is the curriculum, the program that you want to bring in to elevate the skill set. And mindset really is the organizational mindset. In today's day and time, it could be more in terms of bringing efficiencies, it could be about growth, it could be about optimization. So, when you have the holy trinity of all three, which is the tool set, which is the curriculum of the program that a learner needs to go through, the skill set in terms of what are the changes, adaptations that we have to do to bring that about, keeping in mind what's the organizational mindset or directive. Once we bring all of these three together, we usually see very impactful learning engagement, which are focused on business impact. In fact, there are strong data points which further support the criticality of soft skills or behavioral skills for businesses. A Mercer study showed that before the pandemic, senior execs thought that only about 45% of their workforce could adapt to the future of work. And how did the pandemic prove it otherwise? The entire organizational ethos moved to a work from home situation wherein we were kind of isolated from our colleagues, our team members. We had to really switch on how we were working, and that brought in this element of agility. And if we can be agile in a time of crisis, there is no reason why we can't be agile in a non-crisis ridden times. So the way that I would bring your query forward, Pallavi, is I would again break it down into an organization and the three layers in an organization. So first, I would like to talk about our new and junior employees. If organizations can build robust campus to corporate programs, which keep in mind the tool sets required, the skill sets that are need to be worked on, focusing on what is the directive that an organization is trying to drive, those would be really structured and impactful for an organization. This should ideally start with awareness of this new workforce on their own personal styles about what they know and what do they need to know. If we can do this, it will smoothen the transition of them coming into the workforce and also help us as employers to have a talent which is invested, agile, and ambitious for their own success. Secondly, for our high performers and first time managers, I would recommend offering a practical guide for effective learning, communication, agility, how to get things done the right manner, and along with it, also advising them on what the right way is. These high performers can be groomed to become future leaders and managers in an organization. And there's a famous quote that says, great leaders are great at decision making. So, gauging situations, realigning priorities, strategic excellence, and building the tools of this to this workforce becomes critical. Lastly, for our CXOs and business leaders, I always speak about this segment as the one wherein we presume that they know it all, and more often than not, they know. But this is also a segment where we need to over index by bringing digital savviness and dexterity in terms of upskilling themselves both on the technological advances that are happening and, of course, communicating with influence to the rest of the workforce on the needs of an organization. In fact, this this conundrum actually got us as upGrad to build a program which is called Digitally Dexterous Leader, wherein we focus on exactly this. And when you look at it, when you can bring these three layers together, the new workforce, the high performers or your first time managers, and your CXOs together in terms of what they are building on, the congruency of it, that is when organizational success is an absolute given. So, in summary, Pallavi, building programs that are aimed at the workforce in totality, keeping in mind these three layers, will be the simplest and the sturdiest step towards business growth and employee engagement.
Well, thank you, Meenakshi, for summarizing all the key words here for our viewers. Well, lastly, Anuradha, having led the incredible L&D programs at Marsh McLennan, we want to hear from you some parting words, maybe words of caution, any advice to the community, any message on empowering a resilient workforce for the future of work.
I think my one big message or a learning that I've had throughout my career is, as a learning professional, we should not only depend on what our leaders and managers think the organization requires at learning, as learner for learning. It's important that as learning leaders, we bring the outside in perspective to the organization. We help the organization build an aspiration towards learning, and that helps us build that learning culture, which most of us kind of struggle building. Right, everybody is talking about building a learning culture, self learning culture, but that happens only when we empower the organization with enough knowledge to say that this is available to learn, or this is going to help you in your future. Right, we've had conversations around employability in the organization, but these are conversations that not every organization is having, or not every learning leader is having with their leadership teams. I think the sole responsibility of a learning strategist is to bring that outside in view, build that aspiration of learning in the organization, because once you start talking of learning aspirationally, it generally fuels your learning culture in the organization. It helps you really take your learning to the next level and build people with a lot of resilience for the organization. And I think, secondly, I'd say that as learning professionals, we need to be extremely altruistic. Altruistic in the sense that not feel very selfish about ourselves, but provide learning in a very selfless manner, to say that these are people whose lives and whose employability I am responsible for. So what is it that I'd like to do in the best of my situation and best efforts to ensure that everybody is learning in the organization, right? Once we start having these conversations about learning being aspirational in the organization, that's where we see the needle moving. So yeah, that would be my two advice to everyone who's listening to us.
Well, thank you so much, Anuradha and Meenakshi, for sharing your incredible insights and gracing the panel today with your knowledge and your experience. It was absolutely wonderful to learn about your partnership and your vision about impactful soft skills centric L&D programs. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pallavi. Thank you for having us here.
Nice to hear from you as well, Anuradha. Bye.
Same here, Meenakshi. Thank
So
you.
that's all in today's session. We'll bring more exciting and impactful takeaways on empowering your organizational growth strategies in our next episode. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.